Hey Internet, it's Matt here for the Dork Lords. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Here we do all things dorkly, sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes. We've probably got a playlist about it. Feel free to check us out. Today, we are talking about Lord of the Rings. Specifically, we are going to be talking about the 3 Elven Rings. You know, it's the first line in the most important poem in Lord of the Rings. The poem begins, 3 rings for the Elven kings under the sky. Okay, what are those rings and why are they important? So today we're going to talk about that. I think we should do a little background real fast about the creation of the Rings of Power. So obviously most people know about the One Ring. Aha, got it. But there were several rings that were made. If you watch the montage, you know at the beginning of Lord of the Rings, it talks about how the different rings were made. There were 9 rings made for men. There were 7 for the dwarves. Okay, so Sauron at one point is in disguise. He calls himself LOTR, and he gives this wonderful gift to the elven smiths. He's like, hey, I've got this really cool way to make these rings of power. Here's the recipe, essentially. Here's how you do it, and have at it. So he basically works with the elves to design 16 rings. What ends up being the 9 rings for men and 7 for dwarves. Okay, so he's created these 16 rings. Then he leaves and he goes to essentially create the One Ring, which he knows secretly that will then have control over these other ones, because he's tainted these 16 rings by being a part of the process, and by creating the One Ring, he'll have mastery over whoever's wearing those rings. So that's his ultimate plan, and it works. Well, during the interim, when he's crafting the One Ring, the elves decide, hey, we got the recipe. Why don't we make our own rings? And so Celebrimbor, who's the famed elven smith, he uses the designs that LOTR, Sauron, gave him, and he makes 3 additional rings. Because they used the design that Sauron gave them, they're still in some ways dependent on the One Ring. They're connected to the One Ring. But because Sauron wasn't there during the process, during the making, couldn't taint the rings, those 3 elven rings are different from the others in that they are free from Sauron's mastery. He can't control people that wear those rings. Eventually Sauron comes back. He ends up taking the 16 rings back. But in the interim, Celebrimbor has been told, hey, let's get these other 3 rings to safety. Let's get rid of them. When Sauron comes back, they shouldn't be here. So he passes them out. He gives 1 of the rings to Galadriel. He gives 2 of the rings to Gil-galad, who we've mentioned in a previous video. Anyway, he was a hero of legend. He actually had 2 rings at one time, and he distributed them out over time, and then he passed away, or was killed. In any case, Sauron came back, got these other rings, but never was able to get the 3 elven rings, and they were kept in hiding, very much in secret. So you've got the 3 rings. They are Nenya, Narya, and Vilya. Nenya is the one that is worn by Galadriel. It is the Ring of Water, and it's a white ring. It's got a white stone, and then the band is made of mithril. Vilya is the Ring of Air. Supposedly is the most powerful of the 3 rings, and that one eventually, after Gil-galad, went to Elrond, and Elrond wears Vilya. And the 3rd ring, Narya originally went, again, from Gil-galad to Círdan. And Círdan was the elf who ran the Grey Havens, so where all the boats were going back and forth to Valinor. When Gandalf and the other wizards came to Middle-earth to attempt to thwart Sauron, Círdan realized that Gandalf was worthy of having a ring, and so in secret he gave Gandalf, Narya, the Ring of Fire. And so Gandalf wears that in secret. And it's interesting, you know, so Frodo, because Frodo is the ring bearer, he bears the One Ring. He can see the rings of the Elven Rings on people. So when he's talking to Galadriel, he can see the ring on Galadriel's hand. But notably in that situation, when they're in Lothlorien, Sam can't see the ring on Galadriel's finger. So normal people can't see the rings. They're invisible to the layman. So the main power, it seems like the powers are not well defined. I mean, it's one of the few things that Tolkien didn't just write out a list. Like, here are the 6 powers of each of these rings. He was a little more general, but we do know we can make some, you know, we can surmise something about their powers. They seem to have in common, a power that all of them have was the power of preservation, the power to resist the ravages of time. So, for instance, Galadriel uses Nenya to create Lothlorien and keep it somewhat, basically timeless. She also, I think we can say that maybe Nenya has the power of concealment, or like a protection from evil ability, and so she was able to shield Lothlorien, almost like a, you know, like a protection from evil bubble around Lothlorien to protect it, as well as keeping this timeless kind of reminder of Valinor, the place where the elves, you know, used to be. So she uses that to good effect. Interestingly, you know, so when the One Ring is destroyed at the end of Lord of the Rings, spoiler alert, the 3 Elven Rings lose their power. The ring bearers, Gandalf, Galadriel, Elrond, all go to the west, and they keep the rings as like relics, but they don't have the power anymore. But they keep those rings. But Lothlorien immediately starts feeling the effects of time, like decay comes quickly. And so, you know, the elves who are still staying in that region actually move to what they call East Lorien, which is more or less the old fortress of Dol Guldur, is now East Lorien. Because, and you can imagine why. I mean, the elves wouldn't want to hang around this place and just watch as all of the structures, all of the things created of that place just disappear and or crumble to dust. It would be a very depressing place to be. So they leave. And notably, like 120 years later, I think, something like that, Fourth Age, you've got, of course, Arwen, the elf, stayed in Middle-earth to be with Aragorn. Aragorn eventually passes away, and she dies a year later, they say, of a broken heart. But she is buried on Cairn Amroth, which is a hillside in Lothlorien. It's where Aragorn proposed to her. It's a very meaningful spot. Well, interestingly, when she's buried there, so this is the Fourth Age, it's 100-ish years later after the War of the Ring. By then, Lothlorien is completely overrun. It is it's wilderness. No signs of any elf passing ever. And so she's kind of buried in the wilderness of what is now just an overgrown forest. So that just shows you, you know, what the ring was able to do, what Nenya was able to do to hold back time while it was in effect. So Narya, Gandalf's ring, supposedly has the ability to, because it's the ring of fire, it has the ability to kindle people's hearts. So to give people courage and inspiration. And, that goes hand in hand with Gandalf's perhaps natural charisma, natural gifts. And we see him time and time again rallying people to do things that are practically impossible at times, or seeming like they're heading towards certain death. But he is able to rally groups of people to thwart Sauron. So the ring is used to good effect in that way as well. And so the thing is, none of these rings are weapons, right? They're not weapons of power. I think Elrond even mentions at one point, hey, these rings are not idle. They have not been idle in all these years that they've been here in the Middle Earth, but they are not weapons of war. So it's not like the Ring of Fire shoots fireballs. If it was D&D, if it was Dungeons and Dragons, they'd have like a 3 times per day, I can do fireballs, chain lightning, ice storm. Yeah, no, it's not. They're not weapons. And so, I think that was very deliberate, obviously, on Tolkien's part to say. The point of this, in a lot of ways, was that these weapons of war, like the One Ring is something like the A-bomb or something. That it's not like, oh, we'll beat the A-bomb with our own A-bombs. Fire, fire. So, yeah, it would have undercut the message of Lord of the Rings if these had been like amazing weapons. So they're not. So that leaves Vilya, supposedly the most powerful of the rings. It is the one where we know the least about, really. But it is the Ring of Air, and it's a blue ring. It's a sapphire. Elrond's got it. And he uses it, we can surmise that he uses it in part to help build Rivendell as well. Again, Rivendell is somewhat removed from the effects of time. As I said, all three of those rings seem to have that in common, the ability to withstand, hold back the effects of time. So I feel like Rivendell is built as this kind of a timeless place, again, a reminder of the elves' lives back in Valinor. And again, when the One Ring's destroyed, Rivendell starts going to hell, basically. But I would say the unique ability of Vilya is perhaps its ability to heal. I was going to mention, in the Houses of Healing, the bit at the end of Return of the King, Aragorn is at the House of Healing. He's, the hands of a king are the hands of a healer. He is doctoring to people using king's foil and such. And he mentions, no one is as good as healing as Elrond. Elrond is, kind of the master of the healing arts. And, of course, we see that it's Elrond who heals Frodo when he's passing into shadow in Fellowship of the Ring. So, it's interesting, Aragorn's comment about Elrond's abilities. I wonder, because these rings are being kept in secret, I don't know for a fact that Aragorn knows that Elrond has Vilya. And if he doesn't, then it would just be, oh yeah, that guy is really good at healing. Or in fact, it could just be that Elrond has a ring, and that ring helps him heal. So whether it's Elrond had the power and the ring just helps him out, or whether the ring gave him the power of the ability to heal, it's unclear. But I think probably if he had some native gifts at healing, that the ring accentuates that gift. And so probably Frodo can, Frodo's life is probably thanks to Vilya and its ability to give Elrond the ability to heal. So, it's interesting because you've got these, Vilya helped to create Rivendell and make it timeless. And then you've got Nenya is used to create Lothlorien and make it timeless. And then you've got Narya, which is just this, the Ring of Fire. Gandalf's got it. It's not really attached to any particular location. And I suppose, it's interesting that perhaps, Gandalf was so enamored of the Shire and spent a lot of time there. I wonder if maybe he helped make the Shire timeless, during that time, or maybe used Narya to help protect and preserve the Shire as this little peaceful, nirvana, kind of in the middle of a bunch of strife happening. There's no real evidence for that, but maybe a nice thought. So, anyway, there you go. If you've got a question you would like me to chat about, feel free to bring it up in the comments. I'd be happy to do a video about a Tolkien topic of your choice. So anyway, thanks a lot, everybody. We're going to be talking Daredevil Season 3, and we're going to be talking in the near future about Counterpart Season 2. If you haven't watched that show, it's really, really good. It's on Stars. We recapped Season 1 of Counterpart. It's a really, really cool show. I recommend it. So anyway, thanks a lot, everybody. Bye now.